We could hear it when you thumped it,
Yeah, it sounded loud.
but not when you thumped it.
I'll turn up my volume, how's that?
Okay.
Okay. Well, of course, as many of you know, Troy Wayne Poteet was the executive director of the Trail of Tears Association, and we lost him, I think, in early February. But he had been involved in the Trail of Tears from the very start. After the Congress enacted the legislation to create the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail in '87, then that act provided for an advisory council for 10 years for them to set up an association, among other things. And Dan, weren't you on the advisory council? Were you on the advisory council for the Trail of Tears?
Yeah. What was the question?
The advisory council? Okay. But he was one of the ones that was on that and helped establish, in '93, they established the Trail of Tears Association. Then in '96, the first conference was held. And at that one, the attendees were asked to go back and establish 9 chapters in the various states that chapters went through. So Troy was instrumental in helping set up the Oklahoma chapter, as well as setting up the association itself. And then he served on the advisory council until it was eliminated, I believe, in '99. And he was on the tribal council at that time. And then he was later on the Supreme Court with one of the justices. And a few years ago, well, he was on our board for many years. And then when our executive director resigned, then he asked to be named executive director. So for the last several years, he was our executive director. So he was instrumental from the very start of the National Trail. So, and of course, we miss him greatly because he was a dear friend, but he worked tirelessly promoting the trail. So I don't know if anyone else wants to make any comments about Troy or not. Yes.
Want to read something from the proclamation tab?
Actually, I could read the entire proclamation, which I think would be they're bringing it. So it wasn't just us that were aware of all that he had done. The state of Tennessee, after his death, through Greg Vital, who was the state representative from the Chattanooga area, he had a House Joint Resolution number 968 passed through the state of Tennessee House of Representatives. And it's a resolution to honor the memory of Troy Wayne Poteet. Whereas the members of this General Assembly were greatly saddened to learn of the passing of Troy Wayne Poteet, whose life of public service and cultural stewardship left an indelible mark upon the Cherokee Nation. And whereas born in 1955, Mr. Poteet dedicated his life to the service of his people and the preservation of Cherokee history and heritage. And whereas Troy Poteet served with distinction as a member of the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council from 1991 to 1999, helping to shape legislative policy during a pivotal era of growth for the tribe. And whereas Mr. Poteet's steadfast dedication to the Cherokee Nation continued when he was appointed as a justice of the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court in 2007. And he further served as director of the Arkansas Riverbed Authority. And whereas widely recognized for wearing his distinctive traditional turban in homage to his ancestors, Troy Poteet honored the enduring traditions and cultural identity of the Cherokee people. And whereas as a founding member and executive director of the National Trail of Tears Association, he worked tirelessly to enhance public knowledge of the Trail of Tears, ensuring that this chapter of history would never be forgotten, and helping to preserve historic sites and deeper understanding of its lasting impact. And whereas Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. aptly observed, Troy Wayne's passing represents a significant loss of institutional knowledge and cultural passion. Today, we take pause and honor his legacy of leadership and life's work. And whereas it is fitting that the members of this General Assembly should pause to remember the bountiful life of this exceptional public servant and human being, now therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 114th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor the memory of Troy Wayne Poteet, reflecting with gratitude upon his life of service and his stalwart commitment to living the examined life with courage and conviction. We have further resolved that we express our sympathy and offer our condolences to the family of Mr. Poteet, who was adopted March 2nd, 2026. And it's signed by the Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Senate, the Governor, as well as Representative Greg Vidal. So I think that's a fitting tribute. And as I said, his work extended beyond the state of Oklahoma with the Trail of Tears. Would anyone like to make any further comments? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is minutes of the April 12th meeting that Nancy Allen is going to read for us.
Here's a picture of Troy, if you're not familiar with him. Okay, well, let's hope the microphone works. I'll try to talk loudly. The Oklahoma chapter of the Trail of Tears Association held its meeting on April 12, 2025 in a Western Hills Lodge facility in Sequoia State Park, Cherokee Nation. President David Hampton called the meeting to order at 10:07 a.m. and welcomed guests and members. President Hampton shared that it was an exciting day since at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we would be marking the first freedom grades, our 158th and 159th memorial marking. Secretary Nancy Allen read the minutes of the April 24th, 2024 meeting, and they were approved as read. David Hampton presented the treasurer's report. Cash balance on April 27th, 2024 was $16,123. Total income as of April 12th, 2025 was $15,920.48. Expenses were $3,361.72, and the cash balance was $28,681.92. President Hampton stated that the 3-year term of the current officers was up and that we would be electing new officers and 2 directors today. The board has offered some nominees, and nominations will also be taken from the floor. The first nominee for president was Will Chavez, and given there were no resignations from the floor, he was elected by acclamation. Other officers elected were Andy Squires, Vice President, Nancy Allen, Secretary, Treasurer David Hampton. Cameron Fight James was elected as Director for a 3-year term, and Deborah Kirk was elected Director for a 2-year term. Next, featured speaker Melissa Payne was introduced. She began her talk by explaining she was the Cherokee Nation Freedmen Community Advisor and that she is a Cherokee Freedman descendant, and also that she is a descendant of Cherokee Nancy Ward. She expressed her appreciation for the progress the Freedmen have made, taking their rightful place in the nation, due to the enforcement of treaty rights. She spoke of the many treaties that led up to this point. Further, she explained that the memorial marking of the graves of 2 Trail of Tears freedmen survivors to be held at 1 p.m. today at the Gaduki Cemetery in Holbrook was something she is grateful for, and that they are being acknowledged at having walked the Trail of Tears. Freedman Harry Buffington and wife Dorcas Bushyhead Buffington were being honored by the Oklahoma chapter of the Trail of Tears Association as 2 who endured the forced removal of the Cherokee Nation. Melissa Payne called for questions following her talk. Questions resolved around Harry and Dorcas Buffington's genealogy. Descendant Ashwana Wilson Miles, 5th great-granddaughter of Dorcas, stepped up to answer those questions. Troy Wayne Poteet, Executive Director of the National Trail of Tears Association, was introduced. He shared the dates for the national conference, which will be September 26, 2025 in Springfield, Missouri. He then introduced the new Deputy Director of the association, Paul Austin, and gave a brief history of his affiliation with the association, which included being the first Executive Director of the organization. Meeting was adjourned at 11 o'clock.
We do have a marking today also, in case you don't know that. And there's directions back here on a small sheet to get to the cemetery. It's kind of out in the woods, just west of Peg, but pretty good directions back there. Next on the agenda is treasurer's report from David Hampton.
Dearly beloved, oh wait, where's the rock? Laugh, Nancy. You can't do this. This is the income and expense statement from April 12th, 2025 to June the 27th, 2026. Our cash balance, April 12th, 2025, was $28,682. Our income was from book sales, $2,027. Dues to the Oklahoma chapter, $1,880. Total income, $3,907. Our expenses were meeting expenses, $221. Post office box rental, $226. Director's expenses, $114. Zoom for 2 years, $330. Donations for a DC research trip, $2,074. Reprinting the Buttrick Journal, which the copies are available in the back, $4,336. Downing marking expenses, $232. Buffington marking expenses, $437. Total expenses, $7,969. Our current cash balance is $24,620.
David, can you stay here from that?
What?
Can you stay up here for director's election?
Director's election.
It's on the,
I'm not up for director.
no, but I didn't know if you had any other nominees.
Oh, I don't. We'll just have to ask the mayor if they have another, who our selection is. Casey still Casey, right?
Yes,
Okay.
we had nominated during our last board meeting, we had nominated Casey Oldfield, who just couldn't make it today. She had another obligation, but she is an employee with the Cherokee Nation. Sorry, I can't remember her age. She's around 27, 28 years old. She did the bike ride and remember the Mogul bike ride in 2022. And she just being around her all these years, I know she's pretty dedicated and pretty resourceful, and it would be a good addition to the director position. So I'm nominating Casey O'Fill again from our spring meeting. So, any other nominations? So, all in favor of Casey, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I'll let Casey know, he's been elected. Okay. Next on the agenda is announcements. Any announcements from the audience? Any upcoming events that related to Trail of Tears or related to any kind of history thing? Shirley, you have anything? Jack has something.
Yes. Our annual conference will be in Kennesaw, Georgia, beginning September 28th. And go online to the Trail of Tears Association will be the registration for that.
Okay. Nancy?
That's what I was.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Next on the agenda is a presentation about riding the trail. The Riding the Trail book that's coming out in August, on August 25th. It's going to be released. It's related. Of course, the history was about the Trail of Tears, and it's about the first bike ride, and mostly about the 2021 team. It was written by myself and Tracy Sorrell, who's written a lot of books over the last 10 years. But it'll be available in our Cherokee Nation gift shop and other sites around here. All the regular places, Amazon, places like that. But I've got two riders back here that did that ride in 21. I wanted to have them come and just share a little bit about what they wanted to share in the book when they were interviewed. And this book took about 4 years to finish. It just, with COVID and everything else that got in the way, we kept pressing along and finally got it done. But it's an impressive book. Got a lot of photos, a lot of background about the trail, background about how the ride started, and just I think it'll be a good addition to textbooks that school textbooks. As we probably all know, a lot of the history about the Trail of Tears is not shared in our high school, so this would be a good addition to any kind of curriculum about the Trail of Tears. So I'll invite Whitney Roach and Melanie Taylor up here to talk just a little bit about their part in the book.
Hello, everyone. My name is Whitney Roach. I'm happy to be here today, and I'm happy that you all could come. I'm gonna let Mel introduce herself real quick before we start. Got it.
Sianagan, Namiang, Dawada, Yanek Venti, Kasi, Dawada, Jalak Venti. And I'm very happy to be here with everyone today.
So our bike ride was, when we started training, it was in 2019, right at the tail end. And then we were going to do the ride in 2020. We all know how that went. And that was really difficult for us to experience something like that, to give half your year and then have it stripped away. Very minimal compared to like the things and the atrocities, I can't talk, but what our ancestors went through, and very mild, but it kind of put a spark in us to keep going and to have that resilience. And one of the things that the bike riders this year said a lot at the return was, we are a people of resilience. And I love that, because the Trail of Tears, the removal in and of itself, everyone talks about the negative part of it, which it was, and I don't move away from that, but I think it really shows how strong our people are, and that we're still here, and we still have people like you guys. We still have people, as Troy would, representing our ancestors and our people and our history. And so I think this book really showcases that resilience of our people. Yes, it goes through the history. it's a dark history, it's a negative history, but it's important. It's American history, and that should be taught in schools. And so I'm really grateful for Tracy and Will for writing it. During the ride itself, we didn't really understand. There's a lot of emotions that go on during the bike ride that you sometimes don't want to talk about, because it's a heavy ride. You see a lot, you learn a lot. We were a little apprehensive to Tracy when she first came on, just because we didn't know her, and we were like, oh, we have to share such our deep emotions with someone we barely know. And as everyone knows, that's a little difficult. And then we got to know her more, and things began to, loosen up, and things were good. She's a great friend. She's very nice. And so then we got to meet her at the end, and I'm really, really glad. We had talked about it as a team. She left. She was there for the week one, like leg one. She left, and then she came back towards the end, and then she conducted the interviews. And so that kind of helped us step away from her, and she gave us that space to enjoy the ride and to understand it for what it was. And then we got to speak about it, and then we were a little bit more comfortable talking with our emotions on that. And so I think this book represents how we felt, the message we wanted to get across of resilience, of the sadness, and just how it changed our lives, because it really did. I have some of my best friends now because of the ride, and I'm so grateful for that. There's so much light that comes from this ride. And I just want people to understand that though we have a dark history, there is so much brightness now because of it, that though I would never wish our people to go through a moment of this magnitude again, I'm thankful for what it's brought us today and the steps we have taken as a people and to support our youth. And so I appreciate you guys for honoring that and continuing it on. I hope to see more younger people join the association. I know I haven't been the best. I've been busy, and that's no excuse whatsoever. So I'm hoping with Will always at my back, and he knows this, he jokes all the time. I'll say, I'm gonna be there, and then I'm never there. It's really bad. I gotta get on that better. But hopefully I can get on that better this year. So I appreciate you guys listening to me, and I'm gonna pass the mic over to Mel. So.
I think what Whitney shared was a lot of the same feelings I had in regards to this book. So Whitney brought up that we did train during the COVID years. We had an extra long training session, which was great for our physical strength. But for our mental, it was kind of an unintended challenge. We ended up losing more than half our team going into the next year. So we had built these strong relationships with all these people to have half of them not be able to make it with us. And that was almost a perspective that we took into the bike ride. During the Trail of Tears, we lost over a quarter of our people, and we kind of carried that sort of introspective thought process with us as we went along our journey. In regards to the book, carrying a lot of our thoughts and our feelings, I feel like that was really an experience we did want to bring to the public. During the bike ride, we read from Buttrick's journal, which you all are, I'm sure, familiar with. We got to travel to all these different locations and read these passages that helped reflect the situations. And so during those interviews that we had with Tracy, we wanted to give a lot of our insights and our feelings in a way that it could be recorded and shared with everyone, in the same way that we were able to at least receive a sort of perspective from that journal into what was going on with our people. But yeah, through the experience, we all were able to sort of overcome these sort of apprehensions, the mental struggles of going from COVID into trying to still push ourselves to be able to speak with the public and to travel and to share these things. So I'm glad that this was able to come as a sort of time capsule and to share our story with everyone. Whatever.
What up, girls? These were,
Whitney, I wanted to say one thing. Several years ago, we had a bunch of book sales, and we were able to gather enough money to give two $1,000 scholarships. I forgot what year that was. Whitney might remember.
It was my senior year, as a fifth year.
And she was one of the ones who got that. She may want to say thank you to the Oklahoma chapter.
Yeah. So yes, thank you guys so much. I forget, I have a bad memory, but I appreciate you guys so much on that. It really helped me pay for college. I have a degree in cell and molecular biology with a minor in Cherokee cultural studies. I had the intent of going through medicine. However, life's calling, Unesco's calling, creator's calling for me, this was not that. And I'm eternally grateful for that because now I work at the Cherokee Nation. I am in the cultural resource department, and I get to go to schools and I get to share the culture with them and some of the history. Right now we're doing Camp Cherokee, and it's so fun to see the little kiddos running around, and they're all like, "Oh, see it!" And I'm like, "See it!" Like, it's so fun, and I enjoy it so much. So, you guys are part of my journey and my education, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So, put on.
Okay, next on our agenda is Dr. Dan Littlefield at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. He has written numerous history books about the 5 tribes and freedmen history. But I'll let him get up here and then talk about, I'm not sure what subject he's going to cover today, but I know it'll be interesting. It's Dr. Dan Littlefield.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can. You folks don't know how glad I am to be here today. For the last couple of weeks, I've had real doubts about whether I was going to be able to make this trip. But I'm here, and with my usual technique, I'm going to stick with my notes because if I start ad-libbing, it's curtains. So I want to start with a question. How many of you know about the Sequoia National Research Center's website, Journey of Survival? Okay, the rest of you have got a lot to learn. But I want to talk a little bit about that website because we decided to do that in 2017. And this was after the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail had been researched, and much of it had been marked through the state of Arkansas. And we decided that it was time to do the other tribes as well, because we knew that all 5 of the major tribes from the southeast had come through Arkansas. And we thought that it would be a good project to get the teachers interested in teaching Indian removal at Trail of Tears, and particularly the history of the state of Arkansas. What we learned by 2017, when we started this, was that Indian removal had been a key factor in the creation of the state of Arkansas. Everything that was done in relation to the trail was paid for by cash. And that meant that millions of dollars from 1831 to 1839 and came into the state of Arkansas. Then in that period, 1831 through 1836, when Choctaws were being removed, Creeks were being removed, we had millions of dollars coming into the territory of Arkansas, but as a territory, couldn't charter banks under the federal law at that time. So the money had to be imported from places along the Mississippi. And the steamboat operators became the couriers that carried the money back and forth. Well, that got to be really a difficult process. But by the end of the middle of 1836, in the middle of the Muskogee removal. And what the United States decided to do was to give Arkansas statehood before it had the population to qualify. This is right, 1836, right in the middle of Muskogee removal. And it was admitted as a slave state, and it admitted Michigan as a free state to match it. And it didn't have the population for statehood under federal law at the time, even though they granted statehood to it. So, because it didn't have the population, it didn't have the tax base. It didn't have the tax base to build roads, so roads stayed where they were. Now, that means that they stayed there. Arkansas, you know, was not a very progressive state. It wasn't then, and it's not now. But we in Arkansas drive on more miles of road today that the tribes traveled on than in any state I know of. Now, that made our job easier when it came to building our website for the other tribes. We're not now at the point of getting ready to revise this website. We built it originally as a guide for teachers so they could teach removal through Arkansas. And as we finished that, we have been working with the curriculum development group in the Northwest that had worked with the Lewis and Clark Trail. And we had made plans to have an organizational meeting with teachers in June of 2020. And of course, we know what happened in spring of 2020. COVID hit, and that went by the boards. Yeah, so that website has not changed basically. We've done a little addition to it, but since 2020. Now, a lot of research has been done since 2020. And so we're about to begin a 3-year project to expand the website. And what we are planning to do is for one thing, is to extend the roads into Oklahoma that mark the endpoints of the removal groups. Our website currently maps in at the state line. We're going to add new sites that we've documented since the last update on the website. We knew that these places were there when the removal took place, but we didn't have the documentation to support it, but now we do. And we're going to add documentation to existing sites. What we do on each site is to supply documents related to that site if we have those documents available. In some cases, we have sites that have only 1 or 2 documents, and others have more, depending on the traffic that went through this particular site. And we're adding photographs of new signs that have gone up on removal routes that have been erected since 2020. And we're going to have to photograph signs as they are replaced. Most of those signs that the Trail of Tears Association and the National Park Service put up in the state of Arkansas early on when they marked National Historic Trail are practically unreadable. They were made with plexiglass covering that is fractured in the sunshine. The ones that are in the shade are better shaped than the ones out in the sunshine, but there's some of them that are practically unreadable. Now, what we did when we put the website together is we included transcriptions of each one of those signs. So at least people now on the website have access to that. And one of the follow-up things that we're planning to do is to add more survivors. We named our website Journey of Survival because we wanted to emphasize the fact that these tribes are still here today and they are surviving, and they survived that episode in history, and we need to emphasize that. So we've been adding names of people that we know survived for different groups at the sites that we know they were at, when we know they were at those sites. Now, they're probably going to give you a title to today's talk. I'd call it Holes in the Road. And those of us that grew up here in northeastern Oklahoma know about chug holes. And the chug holes that we're talking about now are holes in the story of Indian removal trail tiers that we're trying to fill, not just for the Cherokees, but for all the tribes. Now, this revision, which promises to be well-funded, will help us fill some of those holes. Now, some of the holes that were there in the story at the beginning of the marking of the National Historic Trail are being filled. If you think about the research when it first began, we had kind of a stylized image of what removal was like for the people. It was basically what you still see today in some of the artist renditions about removal. You see people trudging often through uncharted wilderness and a winter scene accompanied by a few mounted soldiers. This is the common thing I see on the internet all the time. Research shows us that the people that were moved to the west from the southeast moved on established roads. They were not accompanied by soldiers. We found one Seminole group steamboat road in hundreds of Seminoles that had 10 soldiers on it. But that's the only group we know that was accompanied by soldiers. The military officers that went with the groups were dispersing officers for the most part. They were not guards and they weren't enforcers. And the idea of moving in winter, agricultural people always moved in the winter if they were smart. They planted in the spring, harvested in the fall, moved in the winter so they could be where we were going to plant in the spring. Otherwise, they'd starve to death. And we know that that was what happened with the Cherokee. All you got to do, for instance, most Cherokees east of the river knew in the spring of 1838 that removal was going to happen. But they planted it anyway. Because that's what they always did. And if you don't believe that, look at the claims of 1842 and see how many of them put claims in for crops standing in the field when they left. So agricultural people always removed in the winter. It was called the removal season. But I've heard people, criticize the government for moving people in the winter. Wasn't that terrible of them to do that? Well, it made sense. Now, one thing that slowed down research for us at the beginning was talk about forced removal. Now, in my personal opinion, when Andrew Jackson signed the Removal Act of 1830, removals after that were forced removal. All you gotta do is ask the Muskogees, Seminoles, Choctaws, Chickasaws, New York tribes, Indiana tribes, all west of the Mississippi now, and ask them if it was their choice to do that. They didn't want to leave their traditional homelands. They didn't want to leave the burial grounds. They didn't want to leave everything familiar to them. They didn't want to trek hundreds of miles off to the left, start over again. Made no difference whether the force was military as with the Seminoles, or Americans moving into people's homesteads, taking over the crops, stealing their livestock, forcing them out. It was all forced removal. And in our website, we list only those tribes that were removed after the Indian Removal Act. Now, while we've made some progress filling those kinds of holes, progress has slowed down regarding others. I gave I don't know what they call it, some kind of talk, special talk, major talk, whatever. Keynote, maybe, in 2017 after the annual meeting. And I titled that, "Where do we go from here?" By that time, most of the trail had been marked.
Thank you.
We made some good progress there. In that talk, I castigated Aaron Marr, who was the NP person in charge of putting together marking of the National Historic Trail, for a lack of reference in any of those markings that noted the hundreds of African descended people who came west for the tribes. I knew Aaron knew about that because he and I were both on a panel discussion at the Underground Railroad and Freedom Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, about 2000. We had been invited to come there and talk about Indian removal as Underground Railroad. And they wanted us to talk about that because so many blacks that came west for the tribes later went on to Mexico, just like the ones that went on the Underground Railroad in Canada. The fact is that the federal government was determined to get all of those blacks that had been living with the tribes out of the South. There was a fear, almost a panic, that was going on in the South at that time in the wake of the Nat Turner Rebellion in Virginia that happened in 1833, right in the middle of Choctaw removal. By all accounts, the tribes didn't practice chattel slavery in the sense that the white plantation owners did, but they lived in a more relaxed social relationship with slaves and free blacks that were in their communities. Many of the free blacks there runaways from the plantations, white plantation. When removal became inevitable, claim after claim for runaway slaves had been placed with the government to gain those slaves that had been runaways. The government refused to allow any of those claims to be followed. They said, wait till you get to the West. And so that's what the claimants did. They tried in New Orleans and held up some there. They tried in Little Rock, held up some there, but they didn't get any with those claims. Now we're making some progress with that part of the story. The Arkansas Chapter Trail of Tears just finished its grant with the National Park Service to put a number of interpretive signs on the Arkansas River between Arkansas Post and Fort Smith. And those signs take into account the fact that there were
slaves and free blacks with the groups that came through. The group, project was called Drops That Fill the River, that the Arkansas chapter did. Now, that hole was being filled to some extent about the blacks who came west. Another hole I see that we're gonna have to fill is the story of the commuters. How many of you know about the commuters? That's something we use today, talking about people who ride train. But that's what they were called in the movement. Commuters were individual family households who decided to move on their own, and were paid to do that. And usually these followed along with the major contingent groups that came over the route. Quite often, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Choctaw commuters were present with all of those big groups that came through. The government paid $10 per person in the household, including slaves, for each, for the Choctaws and Cherokees. The commuters were given a ticket that they could redeem in the West. And the idea was that when they got to the West and turned the ticket in, got the money, that would give them a head start, getting restarted in the West. Now, what's interesting about the Choctaw commuter tickets is that most of them have a brief description of the head of the household. We have people that come into the center all the time and ask us to help them because they can't find the name of the family on any of the removal rosters. It may be that they were commuters, and I don't know whether anybody has attempted it. If they have, I don't know about it. Pull the commuter tickets together, index them. But if somebody did that, I think it'd be a great boon to family historians because many people came west and were paid to do that on commuter tickets. And then we've got holes in the map. How am I doing for time? Okay. Got holes in the road maps. We've got two certain holes in the Cherokee roads on our maps, the website. And one of those is the route that the Sittawaki and Captain Oldfield's group took from Big Ridge to Davies Prairie. We have some people who say that they went directly from Pea Ridge west to the Maysville area and across. And then on our map, we show them coming down those state road to Mount Comfort, and from Mount Comfort up the Davies Prairie Road to Davies Prairie. Not seeing any evidence that they went directly from Pea Ridge to Maysville. But we're going to put some time in researching that segment of the road to try to re-examine what we've got about that to see how accurate that is. But I know that Walmart would love to have that road go right through past this front door. But I want to see some proof that it went through that bill. Another potential hole in the road is at Westville. Now, some people want to put Westville on the map. Now, we haven't been able to find any evidence that any group went through Westville. And there's a tendency going on in this research that I don't like and talk about. But I recently saw a map done, mock-up map done by a person for the National Park Service that has been working with the Arkansas chapter on the roads and Western Arkansas. And this person had marked on that map that Woodall Cemetery was Westville Cemetery. What you call Westville Cemetery, the Woodall Cemetery. Well, now, when I was by there earlier this month, Woodall Cemetery was a Baptist mission. It wasn't at Westville. Now, this is a tendency I see developing in the research, and I don't like it. Some people are wanting to put places on the map that weren't on the road. There are towns that are near the road, close to the road, but they're doing that for tourism. And I know this is true in Arkansas, because the Trail of Tears has been a boon in terms of tourism in that state. So my question is, do we go for historical accuracy or do we go for tourism? Now, as you know, I go for historical accuracy. Now, I don't know whether Highway 62 through Westville or Highway 59 through Westville has more tourist trade, but they didn't put the sign at the crossroads. I don't know. Now, the biggest hole in the roads in our maps in Arkansas is the binge contention. Well, the binge contention. Now, this was a major concern of Cherokees. 1,103 consisting of 959 Indians, 144 blacks, yet we don't know exactly where they went, and we don't know what happened on that road. The Cherokees included household names such as Downing, Mankiller, Baldridge, and Lowry, names that we're all familiar with in Cherokee Nation today. George Lowry Sr. was a member of that group. He was a well-known person in the Cherokee Nation at that time. He'd been a member of the Constitutional Convention 1827. He had been deputy principal chief, assistant principal chief, or that's what they call it there. He was held that position several times during his life. In the 1820s, he was town chief in Willistown, in Alabama. And while he was there, he befriended Sequoyah, who had moved there, worked on his syllabary, and Lowry later, as you know, became the translator of the Bible in Cherokee. And if the stories are true, he may have saved Sequoyah's life. I won't go into that story, but he was instrumental in getting Sequoyah out west to Arkansas, where he went to Daggett town, taught the men there to read and write, and Cherokee took it back east, had those letters translated, and proved that his system worked. And then in 1824, he and Sally came to Arkansas, and they stayed there until 1829 when they moved to Indian Territory. But in the bench part, besides the names I gave you earlier, there were Muskogees who came with the Cherokees west and stayed with the Cherokees. Households that ceased to English, John, King, others of that name. Now, what we see on our maps today of the binge route between Batesville and Carrollton, Arkansas, is pretty much guesswork. Very little of that has been definitely proved to be the road that they actually went. Now, this is the second longest road Cherokees took to the state of Arkansas, yet we know less about that than we know about any other road in the state. So, if you look at what's on our website now, between Maynard, the east end of the route, and Fayetteville on the west end of the route, there were only 2 markers. That's practically the whole state. 2 markers between those 2 pins. One was at the Jacob Wolf House at Liberty, Arkansas, and the other was at Carrollton. The one at Carrollton has been destroyed. It was on private property and man didn't like it, so we got rid of it. I don't know why they just put there to start, but when there was a public park directly across the street. But you can see a photograph of that sign. It's on our website. I made that photograph myself in 2019. I've heard that the 2 signs in Fayetteville have been vandalized. And I don't know whether they've been cleaned up or replaced or whatever the plan is there. The Arkansas chapter is looking into that now. But photos of those are also on the website. Now, we are making some progress on marking the bench route. The Arkansas chapter is undertaking a project to map the roads through Arkansas, and the bench route has become one of the things that they're going to study to try to come up with some kind of definitive work. Now, I can tell you what I know about it, what I found out. I took the original survey plats of the townships along the Carrollton Road, Fayetteville to Carrollton Road, and matched those up with contemporary plats of those same downside. And what I found was that the entry and exit points of the roads on the surveys, original surveys, are an exact match for the entry points and the exit points of Highway 412. And this is true all the way to Huntsville, Arkansas. So I'm certain that that part of the road follows Highway 412, because if I match up the curves and bends of the road on the Highway 412, they are almost exactly the same on the original surveys. Now, that process has to be done for every township that bench route goes through, or we think it goes through, until we find it. And we can accurately pinpoint the roads that the route like they call them. Now, not only do we not know about the bench route, but we know very little about any of the sites that we know are Cherokee sites in the state of Arkansas. Think about what you see about what went on between Pea Ridge and, say, Mrs. Regulars at Stillwell. What kind of detail do you know about on those routes? No. Cherokee routes are the most uninterpreted routes of any of the tribes. The Chickasaw removal is fully documented as well. And those two stick out as problems. Now, the reason for that is that both of those tribes managed their own removal. And the federal government managed removal. Every transaction, financial transaction, had to be recorded, and usually in duplicate And the person, if there was a problem in balancing the account, the person who was in charge of that had to go to Washington and justify the account. So sometimes we have even more evidence about some routes. Now, there's potentially promise of documentation for Chickasaw routes, but hardly any for Cherokee routes. Now, Chickasaws made an agreement with the government to pay for their own removal. The government laid out plans, just like it did for the other tribes, along the routes they thought the Chickasaws would take. But the Chickasaws didn't want to go that way, they didn't go that way. And if the government objected, they reminded them whose money is spending, are we spending, yours or ours? If they wanted to decide to go a different route, they did. And they did that at Little Rock. The government wanted them to go up the river to pull coffee. And they said, no, we're going to the river. And they just went. And they went as fast as they wanted to go. Some times they moved only a couple of miles a day. These other tribes were having to beat out 10 to 12 miles. So, but anyway, starting to add live, and that's not good. But Chickasaw removal continued for years after the main removal. The government paid the commuters for the Cherokees and Choctaws only $10 per person in the household, including slaves. The Chickasaws paid $30. And so Chickasaws kept coming west. Every time they tell the government to pay the commuters, government would say, that's too much money. Chickasaws were reminded it's our money. And they had the same response every time. And this was first expressed by S.T. Hotopa Yemenko. He said, they are our people. We love them and we want them with us. And the upshot of that story is that the Chickasaws are the only one of the 5 tribes that didn't leave a remnant tribe east of the Mississippi. They got them all out. And they did that because they paid for it themselves. Now, we're not that lucky with the Cherokees, sad to say. Well, I guess I better say how we had hope about the Chickasaws. Because they paid for their own removal, they gave receipts for goods and services just like they would if they'd been paid through the federal government. So the receipts exist. And the government published a list of those receipts, to whom they were paid, when they were paid. So we know where they went because we can name the people who live along the roads. But we don't have the receipts. And we want those to put on our website to show the proof. I did research in the National Archives. I spent a year there in 1973 doing research. And one of the things I found is that if records were pulled out of the National Archives, be published in the U.S. serial set of the House or the Senate, those records were not returned to the National Archives. So our assumption is that they're probably with the House or Senate records. We published that document in the late 1830s, early 40s. So we have 2 trips planned to the National Archives this summer and in the fall. And one of the objectives of my assistant director will be to see if she can find those records, which we think are still in existence. But we don't have that hope with the Cherokees. When the Cherokees agreed to remove themselves in 1838, the federal money that was paid to remove the Cherokees was paid directly to John Ross and not to the Cherokee Treasury. And Ross's handling of those funds have been called into question. He estimated that it would cost $66.24 a person to remove the Cherokees. The government knew that was much too high because they'd already moved 4 tribes by that time. But when the removal was over, Ross said that it cost $103 per person to move the Cherokees. And there were irregularities in the handling of the money from the start. Ross appointed his brother Lewis as the chief disbursing agent of removal. Lewis did not submit receipts. He submitted abstracts of costs. And those he submitted for the first 2 Cherokee contingents that left the East were called into question with the federal government. And every one of them he filed after that was called into question. And accusations against the Ross brothers continued all through the process and after removal. And of course, what the accusation said was that they became wealthy by doing funny things with the money. Now, we'll never know. I mean, scholars have debated this, whether they did or didn't, but I don't think we'll ever know. We don't have the receipts. We don't have the fiscal records. All we've got is Lewis Ross's abstract of what he said was paid. Now, just think what the difference that makes now. If you compare what we know about these last 3 groups, major groups of Cherokees that came through the Drain, Whiteley, and Bill parties. In the state of Arkansas, we know where they were every day they were in the state. We know about sickness and death. We know about the weather. We know about road conditions. We know about rations that were issued, when they were issued. We know how much the men that hired out the wagons and teams to haul tribal people to the west got paid per diem to go back home. But compare that to what we know about the Bell, pardon me, the Bench group. We don't know anything about them. And today we're going out to a cemetery to mark the survivor of the Moses Daniel group. Think what we know about Moses Daniel group compared to what we know about these later groups moved by the federal government. We know they entered Ockenshaw Ridge. We know they went down the state road to Mount Comfort. We know they took the Cane Hill Road, Cane Hill. We knew they took the road from there to Vineyard, where they went into Indian Territory, and we know they went to Mrs. Weber's plantation, where they disbanded on March 2nd, 1839. And they started out numbering 1,056. Ended up with 924 as a result of deaths and desertions, and we can list some of the survivors. So I think I'll stop there. Lambasted too many people. I have a list of survivors of Daniel contingent. These will go on our website, various places. I'm going to leave that with your secretary, and you can check with her. If you know other people that are not on this list, I would appreciate hearing from you. So I get their names on the survivor list on the website. Thank you. Time for questions.
What was that website? What's your website name?
Okay, I'm gonna have to come out there because in my old age, I've lost my hearing.
What was your website?
So curiousyall.org. And the subtitle of the book is Journey on Survival. For Indian Rural Development Center. Next question. How you doing? Which one?
We enjoyed your talk.
Enjoyed it. Good. No? Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Littlefield.
You're welcome.
Forgot to make one announcement earlier. Jack Baker revised the Buttrick Diary. It's a hardback now. Added a few things, added some amendments or corrections. It's available back here for sale. Let's talk to Joe back there. Also wanted to maybe do a self plug here. I'm the assistant editor for the Turkey Phoenix. And I just interviewed the man who did the artwork for the Trail of Tears sign that you see on the roads. The woman walking on the metal signs. I never knew he did that. He came into my office a few months ago, wanted to do a story, wanted a story done on that art. And I had never even thought about who had done that art. His name's Gary Allen. He's from Broken Arrow, but he grew up in Briggs, the Briggs community. But that story should be out next week. He did that in 1991, and the National Park Service approved it in 92. So a little bit of that for some of our history. Lunch plans are on your own here in town if you want to have lunch and then go up to the cemetery. Like I said, the directions for the cemetery in the back. What do you think? I think it's about a 40-minute drive, maybe?
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a drive. How many are not familiar with how to get the pass? Once you get there, the directions will tell you detailed directions on where to go from there. And if anybody wants to leave their car here and ride with me, and they don't mind a dirty car, they are welcome to ride with me, and I'll be coming back through here on the way back. So just let me know if you're uncomfortable driving yourself and you don't mind coming back through this way.
Are they gravel roads for the most part?
But no, only the last 4/10 of a mile is gravel road.
Really?
The rest of it's paved. We're lucky there, because I drove part of that area and it is a mess. Oh, the other thing, we have booklets for everyone. There's 50 booklets. I think that's enough for everybody to have one here, right? If you're not going to the cemetery and you beg and plead, I will give you a booklet before you leave today.
Surely can work.
Surely can.
We're going to do
Well, as our director, Paul Austin, to please say a couple words.
oh yeah, he made it. Paul made it. Yeah. Because our executive director for the Trail of Tears Association.
It's my wife's phone.
Of course.
Jack called me about 10 from 10. He said, well, get there. I said, I should be there by 11. He said, it starts at 10, Paul. But I hate that I missed the talking about Troy, which we're still having a hard time processing. But I figure I missed that. I'm really not one thing. But glad to make it here. Not a bad drive from Fayetteville. Not too curvy. I do see, so I'm good about that. I brought Jack this time with a personal check, but thank you, the president. We're in the middle of planning for the conference in Kennesaw, Georgia, at a board meeting there. It turns out, I don't know if you're familiar, the traffic in Atlanta is bad. We've heard that. Oh my. It's out, but we had a good board meeting and we needed to have it. I think, and the folks, the Georgia chapters really forward, had a really good confidently. So I hope, Lady David, are you gonna drive people to the conference? Right?
No, I won't.
Or you don't know? Get your name on the list. Good to be back in Oklahoma. I guess I was here, when was I here last? A chapter meeting, last year, maybe sometime. Always, and I'm a member, so I always appreciate that. I hope you'll, kind of bear with us as we're getting through, the ramifications of Torres loss. You know, a lot of things, but things like passwords, that sort of thing. Is a challenge, but I think bank accounts, that sort of thing, but you've got all that resolved. And moving forward as well as we can. But I appreciate your efforts. Appreciate everyone that comes to these things and conferences, the way you participate in the work that you're doing, which is vitally critical to the work of the volunteers, National Historic Trail. I'm reminded daily that the Park Service would not be able to get anything done with the work of you. Not that they don't know how to do it, but they have the people. And the wonderful work of the association, the markings of the trail, all of that is a result of your efforts. Your friends, colleagues, so keep up the good work. And if you ever have any questions or anything that you might need, just call Chad. Thank you.
One of our board members, Maribel Chase, is kind enough to donate 3 books for a door project. We're going to draw for those right now. So it's a number 11, and Lillian back here is going to announce.
And I will pass because I have them.
Okay, drawing again. Number 3.
Oh.
Okay, the second drawing, number 6.
Will Chavez.
I'll pass 2. Let somebody else. Number 21.
21 is beautiful.
Woo!
Okay, the third drawing is number 4.
Oh, lucky Brenda. Hey. Thank you.
We're going to adjourn the meeting now, and hopefully we'll see you all at the cemetery at 2 o'clock.
Be there. That's
Yeah.
right.